Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you being here. Hope you're staying safe and doing well. It is, as of this recording, it is Sunday afternoon. It's actually a very pleasant sunny day outside. I haven't ventured out today. This is day. This is like we're over. Near almost 2 weeks into the social distancing and self-quarantining due to COVID-19. And it's going to be what I talk about for the foreseeable future, it looks like. So I usually venture out at least for a couple hours, at least once a day, my fiance and I, just to get a little bit of exercise and get a little bit of sunshine while also practicing all of the guidelines that are being discussed as far as staying 6 feet away from people, avoiding group activities. We go for a walk around the park near our apartment without getting close to anybody else, and then come right back. I'm faring okay so far because the way I've decided to distract myself from like the fear that like the world is ending is to just continue to create and make things. So I've been recording lots of episodes of this podcast, and my intention is to do maybe up the output to twice a week for the foreseeable future. I will at least keep one a week, but if I can do two a week, if it helps me, and it helps anyone who enjoys this and listens, that's what I'm going to try to do. And also, on a big part of this will be me trying to like keep touch with people that I'm close to that I can't, be it because my lifestyle in New York, I'm very busy and can't sit down for phone calls, or I physically can't go to them because the responsible thing right now is to not be near other people, even if it's, and I don't approach it as a way of being fearful of getting getting the virus. I'm fearful of giving it to others. So I'm gonna try to do a lot of that this over the next couple of weeks and continue to create things for people to watch while they're at home. And if you are not able to work from home, I hope you guys are staying safe, and I hope eventually that you'll be at a place where you can practice some isolation and protect yourselves and your families. So I hope you guys are all hanging in there. My guest on the show today is comedian Sarah Kennedy. Sarah, I knew her and her fiance when they were in New York City. She is originally from New Mexico, and has since moved back there. And I had tried to get her on the show for a while, but we just while she was in New York, we could just never quite make it work. So now that we have both had the time, we sat down and we had a very lovely chat about a lot of different things. A lot of comedy, a lot of paranormal stuff came up a bit, which I wasn't expecting to talk about. So I really enjoyed this conversation, and Sarah is lovely, and of course we're talking about, interestingly, both Sarah and I were planning weddings before the outbreak started. And by me, obviously, if you're listening to this, you know that my fiance is the brainchild of that. So I'm not trying to take undue credit, but we talk a bit about what was how we're feeling about that particular event in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I hope you guys enjoy this. If you enjoy this podcast and want to share it with others, we're available on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, everywhere you listen to your podcasts. I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carey, and you can follow the podcast on Instagram. I just launched a Instagram account for the podcast called, and it's at Between Awesome and Disaster all together on Instagram. And my band on Bright Ugly is on Facebook. So thank you guys again for listening. I'm going to continue to make stuff while this is going on. And let's go to my chat with my friend, comedian Sarah Kennedy.
Oh, hey.
Sarah Kennedy?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can. You sound great.
Oh, awesome! Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Of course, I'm so excited.
Absolutely. I don't think I've seen you really. We've really chatted since you left New York, but something I've been asking all of my guests over the past couple days. How are you doing mentally and physically?
That's a very nice thing for you to ask everybody. It's interesting because in New Mexico, we're definitely a few steps behind everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I've been so plugged into what's going on in New York City that I've been living on like New York reality for the last couple like days, I suppose. And so like
Right.
me and my fiance, we've been holed up at home and we've already been taking all the precautions and getting everything ready for what's inevitably going to happen here too.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah. Exactly. I feel like they're not using the exact wording yet, but I'm pretty sure a complete, a near complete lockdown of most of the United States is imminent. And I'm just trying
yeah.
to mentally prepare myself for that. I've been basically the only times I've left my apartment since last Thursday are to get food or occasionally take like a short walk with Chelsea just to while we still can, while
Yeah.
keeping as far away from other humans as possible, and then washing my hands vigorously. I just washed my hands, even though we're not in the same room. I washed my hands before I got on this call with you.
That's very fair. That's what I've been doing too. So I think, now more people are doing the right thing. And I think we've started to like right the, the ship, at least culturally. I don't know about leadership wise, but we're doing okay ish.
Yeah, I at least feel like because there's like I was talking with a friend, my friend Corey, about this. I feel like there's a couple like there's a few stages of realizing everyone's going through and realizing how serious this is. Like, do you remember the classic 1997 blockbuster film Titanic?
Oh, of course.
So I feel like initially there were a lot of people like being asked to get into the lifeboats, like, hey, maybe you should not go out if you don't have to, and everyone's like, it's no big deal. The media is blowing it out of proportion, and and then and then a few people would get on lifeboats, and then it's like, oh, the water's the bow's getting pretty low down in the there. It's still probably not as
Hmm.
big a deal, Media, blah blah blah. Why are my ankles cold? That's the
Yeah.
trajectory that I'm noticing, and I'm at least I'm hopeful that this isn't how we all live our lives now. I hope that's not
I know.
I hope that's not how it is, and because I was supposed to get married in like less than 2 months, and
I know.
I don't know if that's still happening.
Yeah. That's so crazy too. Yeah, because I'm planning my wedding too, and like
Hmm.
all of it is just like, what do we like? Mine's not supposed to be till September, so now like my date is the date that everybody right now is trying to like move theirs to. But even still, I don't know. Like we're kind of stuck in our planning. I don't even know like how to send out save the dates or anything.
Oh yeah, exactly. Because it's like maybe the dates.
Yeah, exactly. Save yourselves the dates. Like I don't know. Like
Yeah, save
who knows what's
yourselves
gonna happen over
first.
the summer or at all. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Well, I do know that because Sam Zelch got ordained. He was gonna perform our ceremony. I know that
Yeah.
regardless of what happens of the state of the country on that exact day, I know we'll get the actual have the legal ceremony happen, and if the actual celebration has to happen later, uh, it's really unfortunate, especially for the amount of work that Chelsea's put in because if you know, uh, but the amount of adjustments, and I don't know if you relate to this at all, but this is like the first time, at least for me recently, that a major world event has directly impacted my life. I don't know if you've ever had any experience similar to this. The last one I can remember is the big blizzard of '96.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we didn't really have any effects from that. I remember I mean, I wasn't really affected by the economic downturn in 2008. I didn't own a home, so the housing collapse didn't affect me. I didn't, I was in Albuquerque, a teenager when 9/11 happened, so I
Right.
was so far away from that. So yeah, I guess this is the first one where it's kind of been like, all, ooh, we really are all in this one together, and we're all being affected by it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is like the BTS of global crises. It's just
Oh,
infectious, literally infectious.
it is.
Um, so this is something I want to talk about. You are, I think, maybe one of the very few people I know who have spent time in New Mexico. But you grew up in Albuquerque. Those are your origins.
Yeah, yeah. I was born in a small town outside of Albuquerque, and then I moved here when I was 3, and then I lived here. I mean, I went through college here, and then just decided to move to New York like 2014, and then I spent 5 years in New York, and then I keep joking with Kelly, my fiance, that like the only reason why we moved away from New York, like it's so weird because I loved it and I love it still, but there
Mm-hmm.
was like something in me. I kind of like the way that like barnyard animals act up before there's a big weather change, where we were like, we gotta go.
Sure.
And so, I mean, we're only supposed to be doing it for a year just to plan our wedding and get it going, but then it's kind of like, well, oof,
Yeah, you couldn't get
we're,
back to New
we're,
York. Yeah, you couldn't get back to New
it,
York right now if you wanted to.
I know. It's crazy too because we're supposed to have our bachelorette party out there in May and come out for like our suit fitting and all kinds of stuff. And then now we're just kind of like holding on to our tickets, like, ugh,
Well, hope
please, can we come back?
exactly. I hope the airlines have a generous cancellation policy right now.
Uh,
So New Mexico. I've never spent really any time there. My idea of my only experience of southwestern culture is either is green chilies or poblanos,
uh-huh,
uh, vaguely like Native American inspired, kind of like very like mood like crystal kind of vibes. A lot of people
uh-huh.
with that kind of vibe, and turquoise. So like
Yeah, that's about right.
so like growing up in New Mexico, growing up in New Mexico, like in like your formative years, what was like your experience there? Because I have no idea. Like New York has a vibe, LA has a vibe, Chicago has a vibe, but New Mexico, I have no idea what the vibe is.
For sure. I always felt growing up here that New Mexico's vibe was not meant for children or youth. You know what I mean? Like it always felt like it was meant for like older white ladies who want to have their Georgia O'Keeffe moment,
Uh huh.
and then just the people who have lived here for generations. So it's just like, and then so growing up, I was always really obsessed with us getting more and more big box stores and brand name places. I camped out the first night before our Krispy Kreme opened because I was like, we're finally getting a Krispy Kreme. This is a big deal because we just didn't have any. We have a very vibrant local culture because there's just so many different types of culture that exist here, and there's like some really cool history. But for me as like a kid, I just always wanted to be like, I always wanted to find like the big city parts of our state and like our, and so like I lived downtown in Albuquerque and I tried to like give us as much nightlife as an adult as I could and just try to like bring everybody, I don't know, as much as you can get of other cities and cultures and stuff like that. Stuff that other people have just regularly. Like I don't know. Like there's a lot of examples of things I can think of, but like now coming back to it, it's the other stuff that I really do appreciate. And maybe it's because this is my older white lady statement necklace Georgia O'Keeffe moment myself, but like
Sure,
like I don't
sure.
know, there's just the weather here is amazing. The food here is amazing. The history should be celebrated in a way that I didn't really appreciate growing up.
Oh, totally. And now everyone just thinks of Breaking Bad.
Breaking
uh,
Bad, yeah, for sure. And it's
um,
crazy. Breaking Bad has done so much for tourism here. Like there's a candy store that actually created the prop meth for the
mm-hmm.
shoot when it was still happening, and they would sell it to like little kids, and like you could just get like a little bag of blue meth, but it's just rock candy. But It's been kind of crazy too, because it's like we have let Breaking Bad dictate what the narrative is of our city and our state. And I think now we're all starting to realize, like, oh, we should be in charge of what people think about us and how we define who we are and what we are. And so that part's pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of like I imagine like people in North Dakota in Fargo, like
Hmm.
after that movie came out, and then again when the TV series came out, are just kind of the thing I like about them is that they've kind of embraced the fact that they're the last stop for a lot of people that are, visiting all the states. They're very much aware of their status in the world and in pop culture, I think. Um,
Definitely.
so did you have siblings growing up? Were you an only child?
I have a little brother, um, and he's awesome. He's got two kids, which is nice because it means that my parents can have grandkids without having the pressure be on me.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. And yeah, so it was kind of, you grow up with a brother and you get to do all kinds of fun tomboy things because I was such a tomboy growing up. So
Mm-hmm.
that was nice too.
Uh-huh. So like going down to the creek and like trying to catch frogs, like that kind of like classic like
Yeah, except in a desert. So you're just kind of going out to the mesa and trying to catch lizards. So
gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, there's a
no water.
totally. Oh yeah, that makes sense. When I tried to think of like classic like Americana activities and my brain went to Huckleberry Finn.
Oh, sure.
Almost immediately. There's kind of, and I've always associated there's like a kind of like Zen spiritualness to the desert. Like I guess you could either look at it like that or like it's an arid wasteland of death and poisonous things. But whenever I like to think of like being in the desert at night, like that episode of The Simpsons when Johnny Cash hosts his voices a coyote.
And he's the coyote, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of that here too. And I think Sedona in Arizona has really done a great job of like really amping up aspect of their environment and being like, this is where you come to be spiritual in the dry heat. And I don't know, I think it's
Totally.
something that in New Mexico we kind of take for granted because sometimes we're just like, yeah, it's spiritual, it's cool, whatever. Just kind of let it go. But like
Uh-huh.
everything here is haunted, like everything.
Oh, really?
And I didn't realize it how interesting that is, or like the stories that come with that until I moved Kelly out here because Kelly had visited a couple times, but then living here, I'll take her to places and I'll be like, oh yeah, this place is haunted. Yeah, oh yeah, the ghost here is blah, blah, blah. And she's like, why is every place haunted? And I'm like, oh, that's all old. It's just old.
And are the ghosts like and are the ghosts from like relatively recent? Because I imagine like anything that could kind of I- if I think anything that is vaguely affiliated with like Native American culture, I imagine there's a lot uh, of like cursed land because white people are have a terrible track record when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But like, how old are the ghosts? What era are the ghosts from in New Mexico?
Uh, it varies. I mean, I think you could find like ancient spirituality here, but then we also have a theater downtown that just it opened. I remember that it opened as far as like history is concerned, fairly recently because the
Mm-hmm.
lady who played Ethel on I Love Lucy was at the opening ceremony, and that's like something that's always like mentioned.
Uh
So
huh.
like 50s ish kind of, and a boy died in a fire there, and he's like a little kid, and so there's like a little shrine to him that's downstairs, and before you go on stage, you're supposed to go and kind of like give him a little heads up and thank him, and then so there's that, and then there's a bar here that's like a private club, and it's super haunted. And they have a story about that person there too. And they do like during Halloween and stuff. They always take people on haunted tours of it and
Uh huh.
stuff like that. But so it kind of runs the gamut of fairly recently to way back.
Oh, totally. Those are both good, great setups for hauntings. Haunted bar sounds very exciting, and then child who dies tragically. Excellent, excellent ghost story setups.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if when you were on the East Coast, if you ever got to get down to Philadelphia. I haven't done this either, but Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania is like crazy haunted, apparently.
Oh, I believe that.
That's where
I never got
like
to go.
oh the history of this place is ridiculous. So the way it's designed is there's a central rotunda, and then all of the cell blocks extend off of that. Kind of like, and the place kind of looks like a this like a wheel with spokes. And the way the cells are designed is that you have no contact with any other prisoners ever, and the only light you can see is from the sky, which is symbolically supposed to be an eye of God upon you. And the original idea is that if you have solitude, and it'll give you time to like reflect and pay penance on what you did to get there, and then you'll that like reforms you or something. But instead, what it did is just drove everybody insane, and lots of people like killed themselves in really gruesome ways. Uh, and
Yep, that
and
sounds about right. Yep.
yeah, and then the prisoners just like they haunt they walk the they walk the cell blocks at night because you can never be free. Al Capone spent some time there. Also, his cell is still done up real nice.
Oh, wow, I believe that. There's yeah, out here, I remember when I was in high school, there was an old um well, we used to call it the mental institution, but I know you're supposed to call it like a hospital. There was an old hospital
Mm-hmm.
um that was abandoned, and people used to just go there on the weekends and like take pictures and hang out. And I remember being like, no, thank you. But then now, I mean, my apartment right now is across the street from this extremely fancy hotel. Like, you can't even imagine how nice this hotel is. But it also used to be like a functioning uh, hospital for people who were having mental issues to stay in. When I was little, I remember it specifically being open and being called Memorial Hospital, and then now it's Hotel Park Central. And like, you can in a suite that was 100% the old like crematorium, and it's wild that it's like right across the street from my house, but it's beautiful now.
Nice old crematorium. I like this. I like the sound of that. I always felt like
Okay.
on Zillow or Reneasy there should be a filter uh, for like apartments where or houses where like grisly like murders happened. So you could get some like really sweet deals. I always thought that would
Yeah.
be a really handy feature. Same way, it's kind of a moot point right now, but when Chelsea and I went to Thailand a few years ago, and it was like right after a military coup, so there was like screaming deals, right? So if you could have like a civil unrest filter, you could just
Yeah.
really go where the chaos takes you.
Go where the getting's hot. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. It would really save the family from poltergeist a lot of trouble, I think, if they were able to know the history of their house.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would be that's the horror movie I want to see. Like the not like they discover it's haunted, but they make a calculated risk kind of thing.
Yeah.
Be a very interesting episode of Property Brothers. Okay.
Absolutely. And then they're like on the phone with their homeowner's insurance the whole time, being like, "What do you mean it's not covered? What do you mean? My kid's stuck in the TV."
Yeah, and then it just cuts to like some like bored call center agents like I understand, sir, but the policy clearly
Yeah.
states in paragraph 7 only
You may want to
action.
push back on your homeowners association, like trying to give them like opportunities. Ugh.
Oh, totally. Okay, so you're growing up outside of Albuquerque, and I'm trying to so if you say you were kind of a tomboy growing up, because I always try to like connect the pieces of what draws all of us to the arts in some way. I always thought like most of my friends now, like if we knew each other in high school, we would have come together and had our like little losers club kind of thing. Um,
Sure.
so like when you were in high school, like what sort of social strata like did you fall into? Because I was a drama kid, and then I started a
Yeah.
band, and that's how I found myself as a person.
Yeah. So I was weird. I think it's weird because like when I was in high school, I feel like I had to. Or let me even go back. Did you ever read Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs by Chick Klosterman?
Yeah, I love that book.
Yeah, so the chapter that he has about Saved by the Bell and that one season where it's half Kelly and Elizabeth Berkley, and then it's half Tori, the biker chick, and
Mm-hmm.
he's talking about like how that's very similar to how a lot of like reality is, where sometimes like you have these memories that don't include half of your social scene, but then it just all kind of intertwines. Like that was a lot like my high school experience where I had these group of friends that I just grew up with, and we all went through middle school together, and they were definitely like just like artsy kind of counterculture girls, and all the boys that we would intermingle with who were also like in bands and did goofy stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other half of it was that it's so weird because before high school, I was a super drama kid. I was in every play at my church. I did all kinds of stuff. Then I just, on a whim, auditioned for choir in eighth grade. And I got into choir in high school. And so then I became kind of a choir kid that everybody just thought was a drama kid. And
Uh-huh.
so all of my show choir and all of my theater friends were a completely separate group that I did stuff with. But that I just kind of was between both of them and kind of did my own thing, which is kind of cool because I think that's kind of how I am too as a grown up, as an artist. It's like I have so like there's in New Mexico especially, but I also feel like it was kind of that way in New York too. Like there's people that are like parts of their own cliques or their own group texts or whatever, and I could just kind of float around them. And I really like to be part of as many of them as I can be, I guess. But I'm also kind of being a weirdo off on my own.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
yeah.
relate to that, especially like the comedy scene in New York. Like I always feel like I'm in the middle of a lot of the different, I guess, groups that you would find running around in New York City. Like I would always go and do like the super like super like safe and understanding like Brooklyn storytelling shows and or like the cool
Hmm.
like Brooklyn like back of the bar Brooklyn shows. But then
Hmm.
but then I also felt did like roast battle at the stand a bunch and was like very cool with everyone that I would meet there. But I would never say that I would fit in neatly, or at least my comedy at least fits in neatly with either of that. Like I'm always
Hmm.
kind of like in between. So I kind of like John the Mod in SLC Punk. I don't know if you've ever seen
Yeah.
that movie.
Oh yes, many, many, many times. It's one of my favorite movies.
Oh, it's so
Just so
great.
funny.
I got that on. I remember renting that on VHS, and I just did Gabe Pacheco's podcast talking about that movie. Um,
Great choice.
yeah, so I
Have
was
you seen it before? I guess I'll wait and listen to it. Eat, pray, judge, everybody.
yes, Eat Pray Judge is very good. There's a lot of episodes for your social distancing needs in this time.
Hmm.
Yeah, I had seen it a bunch because I'd seen it in high school and I rented it on VHS and then I bought it on DVD and it's super rare on DVD now. Like if you try to buy like a physical copy of it, it's very expensive. So I feel like I have a little
Yeah,
bit
it's
of a
kind
collector's
of
item.
yeah. Drop Dead Gorgeous is kind of the same way. It's really hard to find, and they were streaming it for a while. I can't find it, but apparently it's still available somewhere. But yeah, and the same thing with SLC Punk. It's like I want to do this curated movie series for people who are just bored and want to watch something together.
Hmm.
But I want to include SLC Punk, but now I'm worried I'm not gonna be able to find it if I don't have. I don't know. I'll look for it.
I think last I checked, it was still on Amazon Prime, so you should still be
Amazon.
able to get it there. Yeah. Um,
Cool.
so we both have that common ground of like going amidst the tribes and the groups. Um,
Mhm.
now tracing this, were you gonna were when you were in high school, were you gonna be? Did you think you were gonna like pursue like show business or a career in the arts? Did you know that early?
Well, I think growing up, my family was always very much like my mom is very into pop culture stuff, and we always watch award shows together,
Mm-hmm.
and she's really into celebrity gossip. And so, I've always been around it, but I've always looked at it from the outside, and it always seemed, I don't, especially for girls in show business, it just seems very scary. So there was never like a time where I was like, I'm going to be a famous actress. I'm going to go to Hollywood and I'm going to make it. But there was like a time where I was like, okay, well, I could be a writer. A writer seems to, you can kind of create, you can dictate how successful you want to be.
Right.
and you can really kind of do that kind of stuff. And so I taught myself how to play guitar, and I did like some singer-songwriting stuff for a little bit in college, but it wasn't really until I started doing comedy that I was like, oh, I could be on stage, and being on stage without it having to be like, there's like, I don't know, especially when I started doing comedy, it just seemed like there were less gatekeepers than in almost any other art form. And then, I moved to New York and I realized everybody's a gatekeeper. But, like
Yeah. Oh yeah.
you
Of
can,
course.
yeah, you can just kind of make your own path in comedy. And that was very exciting to me. And so that was the first time that it kind of unlocked something for me where it was like, oh, I'm really passionate about performing. And this is a way that I can perform that has some element of some, I don't know, safety in it, I guess, which is weird to say, but.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about it like that, but it makes total sense because I definitely know I definitely know some like real gatekeeper music people. Like if you start getting into if you talk to anyone that listens to any kind of heavy music, you will quickly learn who they think is real metal and what is like what real like metalcore is and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Whereas I mean I those kinds of genres I have yet to hear like in like fans in like the singer songwriter or like pop realm go just like 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 that's not real folk, that's not like the
Yeah.
real, there's no harmonica on this, that's not real, that's not the real folk. I don't see anybody playing a washboard or a stand-up bass made out of an old wash tub. This ain't real folk.
Uh-huh. Posers. You're all a bunch of posers.
Exactly. That guitar looks like it's new.
That guitar doesn't look like it smashes fascists or destroys fascists.
Exactly. You need to crush all the fascists with your Martin D18. And where did you go to college?
I went to the University of New Mexico, which is so funny because I remember in high school I had a teacher who was so mad at what a slacker I was because I just did. I mean, I did all my work fine, but he would just be like, "What are you gonna do? You're just gonna go to the university near mom," because that's what everybody called UNM. And I remember being like, "Excuse me, I'm going to college. I think that's good enough." But that was another thing about moving to New York too, and then I realized like, oh, dude, like in New Mexico, going to college is like a great thing that gets celebrated, and then in New York, they're like, "You went to a state school? Get out of here."
Sure, sure.
So that was really interesting. But, I liked college. And that was actually where I met so many theater people. And really, I mean, to this day, they are still some of my best, like, colleagues in like, being creative and doing amazing things. Like, for some reason, the little batch of people I went to college with have all turned into just, like, not just, like, incredible performers on their own, but, like, people who have, like, created the infrastructure for creativity in the state of New Mexico and have done such amazing things for other artists. And so like that, I don't know, it makes me feel really proud. It's really cool.
Oh, that's
But I did
great.
not get my degree in theater.
What did you study?
I mean, I studied a little bit of everything. I was in college. I always joke that like that line in Tommy Boy where he's like, a lot of people go to school for 7 years, and he's like, yeah, I know they're called doctors. Like that was literally me. Like I was in undergrad for 7 years, and
Uh huh.
then finally I just had to like get a University of Studies degree so that I could just have all my credits go towards something and I could
Mm-hmm.
get out because I just had to get out. So I invented a degree for myself, which is it is organizational because I didn't want it to just be corporate. So organizational culture, because I really think that workplace culture is very interesting, and communication, because I had taken so many communication classes that it was like, this has to go towards something. So it's actually paid off in a lot of ways. Like there's a lot of times where I'll go work for a startup and they're so new that they don't know like how to really get a culture going. And so like there's little
Sure,
things that
sure.
I can suggest. And so that part's been really cool.
Yeah,
But
that's really interesting. That is something I've noticed in startup culture as well. There's always like there's it's like open mic adulting kind of like we have a cool idea and we haven't really thought it through. We just think it's cool, and then the ones that go on to be successful eventually, there's like a I need an adult. Is there an adult in this room? And
Yeah.
then, I that kind of stuff I find very interesting. I love when startups like have really like hilariously unnecessary ideas that get made. Like I don't know if you remember in New York, they're outside of. I would sometimes see outside a grocery store, basically like a little uh, pet box that you could put your dog in
Uh-huh.
while you went into the
Your
store.
little pet prison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now most sane people would just tie up their dog for free if they had to go into the store,
Hmm.
or just go without the dog. That's like that's only a startup idea that could be had. If you tried to have that idea in the 50s, you would get laughed out of every bank that you were trying to get a loan from,
Every,
because venture
yeah, because
cap.
you'd be like, yeah, the dogs need an air conditioner for a little bit. It's not a very good pitch. So,
Exactly. My other favorite one was, I don't know if you heard about this one, but in California there was a there was something called bodega they came up with, and it was basically a glass basically a glass encased shelves where you could like, it's basically like a bodega. You go in and then swipe a thing to get all of your convenience store needs,
huh,
and that's only something that can exist in very safe, relatively low crime Silicon Valley. Because if you tried to drop that into New York City, that would get smashed and stolen immediately.
there's a store in Soho. It's called the Drugstore, and it's run by I can't remember the name of the company now, but they make a lot of like fancy waters where it's got like they had one that had CBD in it. They've got ones with like rose petal water and stuff like that in it, and it's run like that. It's just like a big vending machine basically. You go and you get it off the shelf, and then you pay for it with text messaging. But there's nobody running it or anything like. But it could only happen in Soho. Like that's maybe
Yeah, compared to like Japan, where I've found vending machines all over the place, and
for everything.
yeah, and they're vending machines in on subway platforms, and it's remarkably clean. The great thing I love about that is you could use your subway card to get a drink at the vending machine, and I really dig that.
That's so cool. Yeah, that could never work in New York. I can't imagine. I
Oh
can't imagine.
no, no, this plays into my this plays kind of into my theory about like uh, yeah, about like just certain cultures. Like there's just, I feel like in other in countries or even different pockets of the United States, there's just a more natural like kind of most people, more people in different areas are more willing to go, oh, okay, I guess that's what we do now. Whereas other cities are like, no, fuck you.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do what I want. Like New Yorkers are like the person on the reality show is like, I'm not here to make friends. I do what I want.
yeah, yeah. They're like that vending machine is a great place to pee.
Exactly. And did you start comedy in New Mexico, or did you start in New York?
I started it here in New Mexico after our only comedy club closed.
Oh,
So we had one for a long time that like went through the whole like 90s boom
mm-hmm.
and then
What was it
closed.
called?
It's called Laughs, and then they
Okay.
had one in Tucson too. And a bunch of my friends had actually started at their open mics. But I mean, I went to one show there before it closed because I had just turned like 21, and then yeah, so then it closed, and I thought, well, I guess we don't have stand up here. And then I met a friend at a party. His name is Matt Peterson, and he's a very funny comedian, and he was my friend's boyfriend. And I just remember being like, you do comedy? How is that even possible? There's no place to do it. And he was like, oh, we do our own shows. We just put on our own shows in bars and theaters and stuff. And I was like, oh, so it's like telling jokes in the woods. Like you don't have to do anything. You can just make it all yourself. And that seemed very appealing to me. And then that was another reason why I was like, oh, cool, less gatekeepers. Like I can really just go in and do whatever I need to without having to rely on other people or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of jumped in that way. And then I started producing shows and that kind of stuff. And then I was there. I mean, half of my career, I did it in New Mexico. And
Mm-hmm.
then finally I was like, man, I just want to go someplace where you can just be a joke teller. And New York is like the place for that.
Yeah,
And then
I
I
think
got
so.
there and Yeah, but then I lived here, I mean, I lived in Brooklyn, and then immediately I was like, oh, I see. It's exactly like Albuquerque. You put on your own shows and you do all this stuff yourself, and you just keep going. And I was like, oh, well, this is awesome. I've got all the skills for this. I can make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that part was nice too. But
Yeah,
so 5 years in Albuquerque, 5 years in New York, and then now back here for a little bit.
right on. So and when did you move to New York?
In 2014.
2014.
So
Okay, so a few years after me. Yeah, that is sort of like that. I mean, it's kind of out of necessity because they're in New York. I think because there are own because the clubs like are so what's I'm not I don't want to use the phrase gatekeeper because I don't quite think it's that, but they're very heavily curated, I guess, as far
yeah,
as comics that are going to crush with those crowds consistently, and also have enough drawl to help bring in crowds. And it's also kind of like a different style. I've always thought whenever I do like spots in at New York clubs, I always feel like very. I always felt like very like on edge or not or on my toes. Like I never like went up and relaxed. I always like I've tightened up the set as much as possible and just really got in people's faces, even though I was doing kind of kind of silly jokes. Um,
yeah.
I don't know if that was your experience or not, but that's how I always felt. Like New York club comedy is where you have to like basically fight and prove yourself immediately, lest the audience eat you alive.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's crazy too because I think that I don't know. I don't want to like perpetuate this idea that there's a huge difference between Brooklyn comedy and Manhattan comedy because they are literally 3 miles apart. But like, there would be these times where you would just be on a roll at a million shows in Brooklyn, and then you'd have one show in Manhattan, and then you'd just be like, "What am I doing with my life? This place is crazy. I'll never make." And then you'd have to like recover and then get yourself back up and go again. But it was just, yeah, it was just very, very different. Or like it seemed like there's just very different like sensibilities
Yeah,
or expectations.
yeah, absolutely. I always imagined, like in Brooklyn, I could get away with more like band and music references.
Oh, for sure.
Whereas, and I don't want to perpetuate this, and I don't want to perpetuate the idea that like club audiences are like stupid because I don't think that's true. Uh, but I do feel like you want to. I do feel like I do feel like certain topics and certain jokes typically appeal to more well off people with like decent jobs because that's who goes to clubs in New York because it can be an expensive proposition if you got to pay tickets and then do a 2 drink minimum. Um, I feel like there's that kind of person who's looking to unwind has a different expectation of what they want to hear comics talk about.
For sure. Like if you've got a hot five on thruples, you're gonna have to add a lot more context when you go to places that are almost entirely populated by tourists, you know?
Yeah,
And
exactly. And I always liked I always liked doing those spots. Like I don't know if you ever did that hostel show in the Upper West Side. I always liked getting.
oh,
Did you ever do that?
I never got a chance to, but I've heard so many stories about it. And so yeah, I hope you've got a story and that you're just about to tell it, and I'm sorry for interrupting. So
Oh, it's all good. I always liked doing those, not only because the guy who hosted it was always very nice to me, but I always liked getting to perform in front of like internet of people who weren't from the United States because I felt if you could make them laugh, then that was a really like you could travel with that set for a while because I remember going up. Uh, I remember going up in front of like German guys and like talking about the World Cup because that was the year that Germany beat Brazil 7-1 in Brazil and like all of Brazil was just the nation broke after that defeat
yeah.
because Germany just beat them so horribly, and it was so embarrassing. I remember like really getting on well with them. I got another fun story talking about like international audiences. I remember being in Tokyo, and just arriving after like a 14-hour flight and going to do a show at a British pub in Shinjuku, which is like the party, like gambling, like red light hostess bar kind of place, part of town. And I remember being so like so out of it, and I had some really fun crowd work with this Scottish lesbian couple who I was able to riff off of pretty well. That was I always enjoy stuff like that because I was doing a joke about soccer, and they they didn't follow sports at all, but I was able to still make the joke work. So I always like when I can make people that don't look that aren't like clones of me laugh, because that I
Yeah.
think makes means the joke is better.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And
And that kind of gets back to the core of what the whole point is. Like the whole point is to make it universal and to make it to where as many people as possible can laugh at it. So, good job.
yeah, absolutely. And so you're in New York for 5 years, and I'm always interested in this also. Did you hit a point when you were like you told me you had like a oh it's gonna rain kind of moment before you left New York? I'm curious what that was.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to really pinpoint what I thought it was because I just, like before I lived in New York, I had mild anxiety, but just the act of being like an active citizen in New York and commuting and living and whatever just kind of really picks at that little part of you that can get so anxious. And so like I would kind of juggle anxiety to a degree that I hadn't ever really juggled it before just by being there. But that never seemed like there was never a tipping point with it. It was always like, okay, well, it's worth it. This is the tax you pay to live in the greatest city on earth. And it's kind of the same thing with rent. I'd be like, okay, well, this is like 3 times what I would be paying in New Mexico for 4 times the amount of apartment. Or I guess it's 1/4 the size of the apartment if I'm talking about where I lived in New York. But like,
Right.
that's also the tax that you pay to live in the greatest city on earth. And you're here and it's awesome. And this is the kind of stuff that kids in the Midwest wake up every morning and dream that they're able to go and do. And like all this kind of stuff, like I was pretty good about pumping up myself and making it a good experience. And then our apartment was going to go from 2,100 a month for a 1.5 bedroom, which when I say that to people out here, they're like, what is a point 0.5 bedroom? And I'm like, I know that's a totally normal thing in New York. Here, it does not make sense to anybody, a point 0.5 bedroom, but like
That
2,100 a month for a 1.5 bedroom to, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying I understand that completely. The point five bedroom, for anyone listening who isn't familiar with New York real estate, that is a room that is bigger than a closet, but smaller than smaller than a real bedroom, so that they can get away with it without getting in legal trouble. They can technically call that a bedroom. My
Uh-huh. And ours was like a big walkthrough. So it was like this big space that would be a bedroom if there happened to be doors on either side. But nope. So
mhm. So they were
um
going to make that change. I'm curious where you live now, because I like the kind of ambient. I don't know if those are trucks or
yeah.
what's in the background, but I kind of like the ambiance of that of where you're at.
I yeah, I live off the main like well, the main drag sounds like such a small town thing to say. There's a big street here called Central. A lot of small towns have a Central Avenue.
Totally.
Ours happens to be where there's a lot of well, today's not really the day for it, but I guess it's just people flexing. But on Sundays, it's like where they have like traditionally always gone up and down the street cruising their lowriders and like classic cars.
Ah, cool.
So yeah, so there's a lot of that up and down here. People will like have little roadsters and stuff, and clearly they are not social distancing,
Yeah,
but uh,
exactly. It's like I'm social distancing because no one's getting near this car.
they're not getting in. Yeah, so there's that. So anyway, my 1.5 bedroom apartment in New York that I lived in with Kelly was going to go from 2,100 a month to 2,300 a month, and for some reason that broke my brain. I lived in Greenpoint, which I love, and it's a great neighborhood, and
Mm-hmm.
I was close to subways and close to really fun places to go hang out, and my commute was never bad. But like 2,300 a month, just like I could not even wrap my head around the idea that I was about to pay that. And that is also understanding that I know that that is on the cheap end of what some people pay to live where they live in other places in New York.
Sure.
So, but then also at the same time, like part of the reason why that,
Oh, I think I might have lost you.
sorry about that.
Oh, no, no worries at all. So you're saying your brain kind of broke
Right.
with.
Oh, because yeah, part of the reason why my brain broke about the price change was because me and Kelly had squatted for 3 years with another comedian in a different apartment in Greenpoint.
Uh huh.
And so we paid no rent for 3 years. And I guess I just got too used to that.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I could see getting used to that also. And and
Yeah.
and and then so you get back to Albuquerque, and I'm curious. This might be a good way to start coming in for the landing here, because you were always I appreciate a couple of things that I want to say. I always appreciate that you were very nice to me, and when you were in New York, every time I saw you, because in our kind of sometimes in our friend group, I feel like I'll say the wrong thing on Facebook or Twitter, or have the wrong opinion about something, and everyone hates me. But I never felt that way about you. So thank you. And
Well,
and you also took photos for me and Will Watkins when we did a show at the Pit. So thank you for that.
yeah,
Um,
of course.
so I'm curious, outside of the of wedding planning, what has been where have you been at, like, with comedy since you've gone back to Albuquerque?
Well, I mean, it's all abruptly stopped, but
Right.
I was producing 2 shows monthly, and I mean, it was crazy. I have a poster, kind of like the one that Emily Winter has, where it's goals and you give yourself stickers for hitting goals.
Uh huh.
I had one, and one of the things that I definitely wanted to measure so I could compare it to how things were going in New York when it became time for us to decide where we were going to go next was times I've been paid for comedy, because in New York the answer was very few, and
Mm-hmm.
here it's like I've gotten paid for comedy probably half the time. So I would probably do like 1 out of every 2 sets I would get some sort of money for, and some of it significant and some of it like polite and nice. And
Mm-hmm.
so like, and then we happened to pick this amazing apartment here in Albuquerque where it's very possible to do home shows. Like we can have people in here and we can do like really cool, I mean, not anymore, but
Sure.
it's
Sure.
like totally set up for that kind of stuff too. And so like we could host things and do all kinds of really cool creative stuff here that way too. But the paying part was just like very interesting to me because like I'm able to. I mean, I just quit my day job a couple weeks ago because comedy and everything else was going so well. Because I'm also now that I've moved back, I started kind of lightly DJing in New York, and then when I got back here, now one of my like side jobs is helping a wedding DJ.
Uh huh.
And so I'm like learning how to do that so much better. And like now I've got like I did have a weekly night where I was DJing, and then I would DJ at a couple other little places and stuff like that too, and make money from that also. So it was like kind of incredible to see how that part of the creative work can really be sustained. And I didn't have to like have a crazy hour commute and then 40 hours a week at least, and then like happy hours and everything with the people that you work with kind of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do kind of a similar thing. That's awesome to hear. I'm glad that you have that going on, and I trust that it will once the world maybe corrects itself. Hopefully, sometime this year.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of doing something similar. Like I would still do spots whenever the opportunity came up. But I've started playing in a band again. I play bass in a
Yeah.
band. We were going to
Yeah.
have our first 3 shows. Those have been postponed. Uh,
Oh.
and but the other cool thing I do is, like, I have a couple supporters on Patreon for this podcast, so I get a little we get a little extra stuff there. Not I'm
Shout
not
out to them.
Yes, I shout them out in the outro, and I also thank you, Leo. Thank you, Mary Beth, and I also and I also tech at the People's Improv Theater a lot. So I'm on their approved tech list. So when they reopen, I had teched with regular groups for a few years, and now I'm starting to meet new people and are
Oh,
putting on shows there, which has been very cool because I don't have a ton of interest in diving into sketch comedy or improv, but I like those people. They're kind of like
yeah.
they're a more uh, what's what's the best way to say this?
Stable.
They're used to working. Yeah, they're used to working in groups, and yeah, so it's kind of pleasant to it's kind of pleasant to be around. So great. This has been really nice, Sarah. I'm glad that things are I'm going to say are because I don't think this is how we're going to live our lives these
For
past
sure.
2 weeks. I'm glad that things are kind of things are grooving for you out in New Mexico. And if you come back to New York, or if I ever get to New Mexico, I know I will be happy to see you again, and hopefully we get to do some shows together again soon.
That'd be awesome. I mean, right before this whole thing started, I was in talks to open up a comedy space here, like have one going for us again.
Uh huh.
So once that happens, I want it to be a space where when people are like, because everybody goes to Denver and then they want to go to LA, but if we could be like this little stop on their way to LA, everybody I know can drop in and do a fun show and do some cool stuff. So that's my next goal.
That's awesome. Well, just let me know the email where I need to send a tape because I don't want to. I'll never assume anything. I'll make sure that I send a current tape because I always like reading Emily's Twitter and be like, oh, okay, I'll make sure I do that. When
Yeah.
as far as like trying to book stuff. Is there anything I can plug before we get out here?
Yeah, so, well, first off, everybody should follow me on Twitter. I've been especially active on Twitter lately since I've been home. It
Mm-hmm.
is Sarah K, so Sarahk, and then Omedy, Omedy. So Sarah Comedy, but with a K. You would not believe how much easier that is than my old Twitter handle. So
Uh huh.
that you're welcome. And then, so follow me there. And then also, I'm helping to put together a comedy festival out here. And as far as we know, it's still going on. It's going to be at the end of June, June 25th through 28th. And we're accepting submissions for that right now through April 1st. And we may extend it. So people can go to albuquerque.com/funny-fiesta. And you can submit there. It's real cheap to submit. It's like our regular price is $20, which is most other festivals' early bird pricing. So really worth it.
Awesome. That sounds great. Maybe that'll be the first post quarantine activity people will want to do. Uh,
Yeah, for sure.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Sarah. I appreciate
Thank
you
you,
taking
Will.
time to talk to me. And yeah, well, we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, have a good night and bye, everybody.
Yes. Good night to you as well. And give my best to Kelly.
I will, absolutely. All
Awesome. Bye, Sarah.
right. Bye.
Okay, folks, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. Thank you, Sarah, for your time, and glad things are going well out in New Mexico. Hope you guys are staying safe. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast and want to share it with a friend, we are available wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. Those are the big three. You can follow me on Twitter at Comic Will Carey. You can also follow me on Instagram, Will Carey23, and on Instagram, the podcast is at Between Awesome and Disaster. And you can follow my band, Bright Ugly. We have 4 songs on Bandcamp if you're looking for some jams to listen to while you're practicing social distancing. Also want to give a shout out to my supporter on Patreon at the awesome producer level, Mary Beth Mooney. Thank you so much for your support. And I hope you're staying safe. And if you want to check out some of the things I've got going on over at patreon.com, it's patreon.com/awesome disaster. I'm going to be putting some more stuff over there very soon. Stay safe, everybody. And I will see you next week between awesome and disaster. Take care, everybody.